Hello, and welcome to Sound Off with System One. I'm your host, Krista Kornchak, and I'm here today with our panel of experts to discuss your biggest interview and resume questions. That means if you're tuning in live, you can send us your most pressing questions. But before we get started, here are a few words about System One. System One is a leading provider of specialized, highly technical outsourced services and workforce solutions to critical infrastructure, technology, life science, and government sectors, putting more than 650 employees and 9,000 contractors to work in the United States, Canada, and the UK. As you're tuning in today, please join us in the comments. Rich from our marketing team will be monitoring them. Let us know where you're joining from and what industry you work in. And as I said before, we encourage you to send us your most pressing interview and resume questions, as this week's holiday-themed episode of Sound Off with System One is a live Q&A dedicated to answering your questions. But first, we're going to get started with introducing our panel of experts. They're also going to be sharing their hot jobs, which you can find at the bottom of the screen, or by scanning the QR code. And to view all other available jobs, please visit jobs.system1.com. Maggie, let's start with you.
Hi, good afternoon. Maggie Marroquin, Director of Accounting and Finance in Houston. I've been with System One almost 7 years in staffing for 12, and prior to that in accounting for 10. So definitely have you covered in all areas. The hot job that I want to talk about this week is a senior accountant role with a growing architecture, AEC company, architecture, engineering, construction company. They are located West Houston. This position is open due to growth. Houston is still continuing to boom. Great promotional opportunity for a hands-on senior accountant looking to take that next step into their career. Could very quickly grow into an assistant controller role. Focus of the role, heavy GL, complex reconciliations, month-end close, operational accounting support, some fixed assets, but very hands-on, looking for that natural leader that enjoys kind of being in the weeds and working high level. So client is looking to move quickly. They are requesting folks to know Deltek or Vantage Point. So if you know anybody out there looking for opportunities, if you yourself are looking, I'd love to talk to you. Feel free to apply.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Jennifer?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Krista. I'm Jennifer Novojoski. I'm the director of Joule's Life Sciences recruiting team. So I'm actually based out of New Jersey. I've been with Joule for about 17 years, and our business focuses on temporary staffing within the life sciences space. So temp to perm, some direct hire as well. Today's hot job that I wanted to highlight is we actually have 2 openings for manufacturing technicians. This is with our biopharmaceutical client located in the central New Jersey area. They're really looking for somebody who can bring some expertise in the area of GMP, clean room, aseptic manufacturing. So for this position, you don't need to have a completed degree. If you have 5 to 10 years of aseptic manufacturing, that's really ultimately what they're looking for. So if this is something you're interested in applying for, you can see the job below. Go ahead and apply.
Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Shanazi Gamharani. I'm an IT recruiting manager based out of Tampa, Florida. Right now, I wanted to talk about my hot job, computer systems engineer. I'm hiring 2 of those for they're a company based in Tampa. They specialize in developing military training systems and flight simulation software. Anybody who has 4 years of development with C++ in a Linux or Windows environment and able to obtain or already has a secret DoD clearance, please apply below.
Thank you all so much. And again, you can view all other jobs at jobs.system1.com, or you can scan the QR code on your screen. Again, we're going to be discussing your biggest interview and resume questions. So please, we encourage you to drop questions in the comment section. This is going to be a live Q&A. But to start, I would like to ask our panel of experts what the most common questions are that you get from candidates, or what the biggest piece of advice you like to give your candidates in regards to the interview and the resume. Maggie, we'll start with you.
Perfect. One of the questions that I get asked a lot being in recruiting is formatting of a resume, or, kind of what details in general on there. And, everybody has their own opinions when it comes to resumes. And I always like to preface the conversation by saying, do put on there whatever you're comfortable with, right? Everybody's going to have their own opinions on formatting and all the other things that can go with that, whether the page should be colored or the font should be pretty, or, is it all about presentation? And to me, that makes sense. If it's like like more of a technical on the IT side, the pretty side of IT, right? Like putting something together. Yeah, I think all of those things kind of matter. But in my space specifically, they're looking at the pertinent information, right? They're not hiring you to be a resume writer. So you do need to check certain boxes when you're getting your resume together, as far as skill set, focus, what you've done in the past, things of that nature. But try not to overthink it. At the end of the day, you're selling yourself on paper. You want it to be attractive, to grab somebody's attention, to keep them reading, but you have to sell yourself in person. So you have to be comfortable with the layout, the format, the details on the resume, because you're going to have to speak to that. That's probably the most advice that I give often. The other piece too is, hey, should I pay a resume writer, to put this together for me? And my answer is always, if you want to, but free is me. And so with all the available free resources online, developing that relationship with your recruiter, they should be able to help you get something solid together when it comes to your resume. I kind of discourage paying, a fee for a resume, because I think at that point you're just kind of overthinking it. So that's kind of the thing here. One thing that's really big in Houston too, industry knowledge pays, right? I mean, Houston is a very energy, oil and gas driven environment, and that kind of skews the market when it comes to compensation. But it's also a very transitional city. And so I love seeing resumes that have like the company name and then a brief, like 1-liner, 2-liner that says, global manufacturing company focused on yada, yada. So, that's manufacturing industry, or, extensive oil and gas, yada, yada. Something that says industry, because with Houston being so transitional, a lot of these folks aren't overly familiar with the specific companies in the area. And so if they're looking at a resume, the hiring manager is looking at a resume, they can very quickly see, okay, this person has manufacturing, they have oil and gas, they have, industrial services or whatever. So I think that's helpful. And then I always tell people to put a software section on there. The software, everybody can customize it any way they want, but put it on there. I, as a recruiter, will often, I'm sure you guys do as well, filter resumes based on software, right? Like if the client says this is an absolute must have, I want to see it. And I'll just do a quick search and see who has the software. So those are probably my 3 key points.
Awesome. And those are great key points. And I think before we get to everybody else's advice, I actually want to point out this question we got from a viewer. I think it's a really unique question. For transitioning military from active service to either a federal service or contracting/private sector, how would you recommend the service member to civilianize their resume to be more competitive or applicable to potential employers?
Andrew, thank you for your service, sir. I want to lead with that. Just to jump in, because I do work with a lot of defense clients, big names, Big Five. Civilian, it's interesting to play off the earlier point about industry matters. There are a lot of industries where your military service experience is very relevant. Construction, manufacturing are 2 of them, and then large defense. Maybe just making it more approachable to recruiters or HR individuals by, like, for example, defining some of the military jargon in there. So if it's a SOF, spelling out special operation forces, just being able to explain it in context right there.
I think that's great advice. And I think that can actually really apply for all industries, just because if you're switching industries, what you're going into, they might not really know exactly what the term is. So, really defining the project, I think, is huge. In an interview, what is the best way to answer, "Tell me about yourself"? Thank you to our audience member, Tracy.
Yeah, so I can take that one. That's actually a really great question. And, you would think that has to be the most simple thing to answer, but it is really difficult, right? Like you have to think about, well, what do they want to know? Like, do they want to know a little bit about personal? Do they want to know just professional? And, you have to kind of find that balance. And usually that question comes right at the beginning of the interview. So you haven't really had a lot of time to read or gauge the personality of the person who's interviewing you, if that makes sense. So I think with all that considered, your best bet is really just to be honest, be positive, and give a very brief overview, a very short overview of why you're interviewing in the first place. Maybe perhaps what you've done, what's motivating you to look for a job right now. And then that could be a good segue into the questions for the interview, whether you're asking the interviewer or vice versa.
Sure. All right, we have another question coming in. I am a pharmacist who spent half of her career in the pharmaceutical manufacturing and half in pharmacy practice. At 60 plus, what are the possibilities? I'm looking for a non-traditional job, something that bridges between manufacturing and pharmacy practice.
I actually would be happy to take this one again, if that's okay, just because I'm in the life sciences. So we see questions like this all the time, and we work with so many individuals in a similar situation where, within life sciences, there's so much overlap of skill set, right? Working in a pharmacy versus working in manufacturing, there's a lot of similar guidelines there. So I really think your best bet, similar to what Maggie was talking about, like connect with a recruiter. They're going to be the ones to have that conversation with you to figure out what did you like from the different aspects of the roles that you've been in? What do you want to do next? What don't you like? And then they can help personalize that recruitment experience for you to help figure out what's the next best step.
Absolutely. Really great advice. And again, if you are tuning in live, please send us your questions. We have the panel of experts right here. Looks like we have a question from a viewer, Allie. What about references? Should they be on my resume? Who should they be?
I'll jump in there. Resumes are amazing, right? I get so excited when I meet a candidate and they're just amazing and personable, and just have just a great work history. I can't wait to talk to their references. And the short answer, no. Let's not list that on a resume. You want to kind of, what I do and what I encourage candidates to do is to have a separate list of references with contact information. And that's kind of your business card at the end of an interview, right? If it's virtual, then feel free to email that. But to me, it's, you're following up the interview. Do you have any additional questions for me? Is there anything I can clarify or, expand on that wasn't clear? And then as, the hiring manager says, nope, I think I have everything I need. Then it's, okay, well, I wanted to share my list of references with you. These are folks that have managed me in some type of capacity or folks that I've worked with throughout my career. They'd be more than happy to answer any additional questions you may have. And then you just leave that contact information with them for that person to reach out directly. When it comes to references too, you want to make sure that those references know you've listed them as references. Nobody likes surprises. So just keep in contact with them. One thing I encourage candidates to do too is, if they're getting laid off, if they know they're transitioning or phasing out, ask your hiring manager, hey, you guys, I know my days are limited here. Would you mind writing a letter of recommendation for me? Would you mind, putting something together? And more often than not, folks are more than happy to do that. In the bigger corporate environments, there can be some red tape around that. But they may have a corporate policy where they can't provide references, but they can provide letter of recommendations. And that's one way to kind of work around that and still get those good details to take with you to the next job.
Maggie, I just want to add to that. I agree with everything you just said. And I think one thing that's important too for the job seeker is put some controls. By you having your references on a separate document, you're putting controls in place, right?
Yes.
Because then you have control of when you release that to whoever. If you are very active in your job search and every day you're going online and you're hitting apply, and you're submitting your resume with your references on there, you don't know who is calling your references. Your references, who are your trusted resources to speak on, on your behalf in a positive light, could be getting several phone calls a day from a variety of people. So I just wanted to highlight that, as a job seeker, like you have control over that process. And so even more so why it's important just to keep them separate.
Good point.
Thank you. All right, we have another question. Victor is asking, I live in the DC metro area and have had a hard time getting a hold of local recruiters. Any tips on how to get a hold of one that can help with jobs within the industry I want to get into.
Victor, I'll jump in here. Victor, I'm so sorry to hear that. But again, with local recruiters, DC metro area, there are a lot of companies out there that have recruiters that sit nationally and support Washington. They support the DC area. They support Virginia. So how about this? If you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'll connect with you. And I have a team. We have some teams out there that can actually help. So I'll find you afterwards.
Awesome. Thanks, Shazi. Yeah, LinkedIn is such a great tool. There's so many recruiters on there, and if they're doing their job correctly, they should be right after you.
But don't limit it to just the recruiters locally, because they may be find out where they're sitting in the company, because they might have other sites too.
Awesome advice. What are your thoughts on the need for a cover letter? Thanks for the question, Jessie.
I can take this one. Oh,
you go right.
Okay. All right. I have mixed feelings about a cover letter, to be honest. I think it really depends on the type of job that you're applying for. I think you have to think about who your target audience is, what you have to bring to the table. Honestly, I'm 50-50 on it. Just even thinking about feedback I've gotten from some clients. I think some hiring managers are so busy that I think even just getting a resume in front of them and the time that they take to really review a resume before deciding who to interview, it's such a small window of time. I think a cover letter can be a good way to just very high level summarize. If you're going to do one, I would keep it short and sweet and very concise, so that when a manager looks at it, they see keywords, they go, yep, I want to call this person. So I could go either way on it. I think you have to be very thoughtful about the content you're putting in the cover letter.
I'd love to add to that too. I very much agree. I thought I might be a little biased or a little on the fence. But to me, if you have a staff accountant background and you're applying to a staff accountant role, you don't need a cover letter, right? If it's, I went on a hiatus to raise a family, and I've been out of the job market for 4 years or so, and I have a degree in chemistry, but all my experience is accounting, and I'm applying to a chemistry role. Yes, I need a backstory. I need to know why this makes sense. I need to know where you are before I pick up the phone and have a conversation with you. So if it's, if your experience matches the job you're applying to, I don't feel like a cover letter is necessary. If there's a gap in employment, I need more backstory to understand where you're at. What do you want to do kind of going forward? I feel like, in my accounting days as a manager, I needed those same details. So I feel like it's helpful then.
Absolutely. Maggie, and just to jump in one more time and play off the next question, I think what you're talking about is context. That piece of paper is just a piece of paper. Let's add some context, especially if we're breaking into new industries. If it's a cover letter and you're doing that, maybe instead do a quick summary of your relevant skills and why or how you'd be a fit. So draw that connection dot from one industry to another. If you're a chemical engineering undergraduate without real professional experience and running into that chicken versus egg situation, which comes first, best way to do that, maybe highlight some of your project experience. If you had a graduate project experience, my advice there too would roll it up under a timeline. If you did a program or a personal project on your GitHub or on your spare time, find a way to put that in there and timeline it out. Your junior year, you did this. Your senior year, here's your big design project. I think that would allow them to see more of what you studied while you were in school.
Those were all great. And I think just to add to that, especially if you're a recent graduate with no true industry experience as of yet, if a manager looks at your resume and decides to schedule an interview with you, they know going into it, you don't have that industry experience, right? So what they're going to look for, they're looking for in your resume, how can your resume potentially show what your work ethic is like? Did you hold a part-time job while maintaining a full workload in school with projects? Were you actively involved in clubs or different memberships of things? You really want to showcase those items because it's very telling. If I look at a candidate's resume and they're a recent graduate and I see that, they worked as a research assistant, they held a part-time job, they had a full course load, they were volunteering here, doing this, doing that. I'm like, man, that person's going to be responsible. That shows me that they probably have really good time management skills. So definitely just, any experience really is good experience. And again, I just go back to just be thoughtful about how you line it up on your resume, and, connecting with a recruiter can really help with that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll jump in on this next question because I do get that question often, where somebody's going down this path and 10 years in, they kind of want to make a switch and move and do something else, which I think is great. My best advice there is to be flexible on what that next role looks like. Oftentimes when you have 10 years of experience as an HR manager, you were paid X, your bills are based around X, right? You have these certain expectations that come with that. And you go to school for accounting and you want to get an entry-level accounting role. You're kind of starting over. Granted, you're a working professional, you're probably polished and super, good communication skills, and you definitely bring a bag of tools to the table, just not specific to accounting in the role. But that compensation package is going to be different because the company walking in the door, they're vesting in you, going to take you under their wing, show you all the ropes and everything that you don't know yet. And so if you were making $100K and you're applying to a staff accountant role, there's going to be a big swing when it comes to compensation. So be flexible in what that looks like when you're making that career move, because the company is going to be looking for that.
Absolutely. All right. One user said, I have been in pharma operational clinical trials. I want to transition to pharma sales, and I want to know the best way to position myself without sales experience. Also note that I am 59, another career transition.
I think we're getting a lot of questions here about transitioning careers.
I know, this is great.
And I think some good advice here might be also draw some parallels. Pharmaceutical clinical trials, the products. I think that product knowledge would be hugely advantageous in selling or discussing the product or consulting on a sales. There are different ways to sell something. Your knowledge of that product itself would be huge. I think leveraging any connections, if you're jumping industries and you're in a leadership role, well, leadership translates. If you're in manufacturing and you want to go into pharma, well, there are pharmaceutical manufacturing companies where you have an easier bridge across.
All right. We have another career transition. Pharmacist with several years of direct patient care and project work, but trying to pivot into industry and medical safety monitoring. Any advice on how to market those transferable skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what both Maggie and Shnazi had said so far, again, I think some of those things apply to this question here. In fact, I actually just spoke with somebody this morning who was in the clinical trials sector, had moved into a direct patient care healthcare sector, and now they're looking to kind of get out of that because, just for a variety of reasons. And really through the course of the conversation, what we really mainly talked about is exactly what you both have been saying, right? Like just think about those transferable skills, right? In terms of how to market them, it's how to reposition those skill sets on your resume. Your experience is what it is, right? You can't change that. But in a case like this, perhaps a cover letter, right? That might be a good time to use a cover letter to say, hey, I've done this, but I want to do this. And here's what I have as to why I think I'm a good fit.
Love that.
Definitely. Anyone who's nervous to transition careers, clearly you're not alone. It's very doable. So connect with a recruiter and go for it. Another question we have from Jesse, should we remove details from our early low-level job experience section in the resume as we are aiming for higher roles?
That's a great question. I think, from a recruiting perspective, we are often, quote unquote, selling your skill set as an experienced professional to our clients, right? And so folks are really looking at what have you been doing the last 5 to 10 years? I meet some very tenured, seasoned candidates that have 20 plus years of experience. If you list everything on your resume, it's going to be 5 pages long, right? And that's not fun to kind of read through, right? So I would definitely try to keep it to, maximum of 2 pages, but have all the details on there. But those last, 5 to 10 years, what have you been doing? And be very detailed from that regard. Again, I'm going to talk about Houston a little more specifically, and industry knowledge paying. And I encourage candidates, when you start removing things from your resume, so if you've, been in the job force for 25 years, you're not going to list the several positions, all of them that you've had, especially if you've been at the last company, for 10 years or what have you. I always encourage candidates, like in that summary, when they're talking about themselves, this is who I am, this is who I'm about, 15 plus years of experience in oil and gas, manufacturing, financial services, like something that's, if you start dropping, if you graduated college and your first job was in financial services, right? But it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But you had some really good noteworthy experience there that you don't want to just take off altogether, then add a little nugget, right? To get the conversation going, to get somebody to see that so you can talk about it. And so as a hiring manager, when I'm looking at your resume and I see your summary of qualifications and you have your industry knowledge listed and it says financial services, well, the 3 companies that you've listed where you've been at the last 15 years, they're not financial services. I will say, financial services. Tell me about that role. What did you do there? And you could say, oh, I spent 10 years doing, X, Y, and Z. It's a great little conversation starter. So if you start trimming your resume up to be more relevant to your current work experience, put little nuggets in there that will start the conversation about your previous experiences not listed.
Great advice.
Absolutely. Perfect. And it looks like we are out of time for today. So I want to thank everyone for sending in their questions. We definitely had some really good expert advice, a lot of career transitioning. So again, if you're looking to make a really big move in your career, please connect with our System 1 recruiters and they will be happy to point you in the right direction. Don't forget to follow System 1 on LinkedIn if you're not already. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and tune in to Sound Off with System 1 every first and third Friday at 2 p.m. for more job seeker topics. Our next Sound Off with System 1 live stream is Friday, December 15th at 2, and we will be discussing ways to evaluate your career goals for 2024. We'll see you then.